start off with page 322. 322. Maybe stick. Page 49. 49. All right, on the first.
door for each one who came out for the service tonight. Brother Christian had his shoulder surgery today, and said it was a little more extensive than they had thought it would be, but he did well during the surgery. Roger Bullard's having a brain surgery on Friday to remove a mass in his brain at University Hospital. Charles Armour's having neck surgery tomorrow. A friend of Sister Billy's, Amy Hanna, found a brain tumor with her, and she had can't remember Brother John Shirley. Also, Sister Pam sick tonight. Karen Cook Sloan, she had surgery on Monday, and she hasn't been doing well the last couple of days. Bobby Whitsitt is having some more problems. Sister Judy asked me to remember him in prayer. Sister William Clark been having problems retaining food. She had a lot of problems throwing up. Sister Earlene Myers in the nursing home. And my wife's been sick with that crud that's been going around, that upper respiratory thing. Remember her in prayer. Anyone else have a prayer request?
My sister Diane had back surgery.
All right. Anyone else have a request?
Several months ago, I had asked the church to remember Mindy Rimal Mikowski. She passed away Monday. And then remember Leon Petit, he lost his daughter, Madeline, both of them had cancer.
All right. Anyone else?
Our coworker, Mallory, will be having surgery tomorrow.
Okay. Someone else? Okay. Anyone else? Got an unspoken request, you'd like to raise your hand. Pray for me as I bring the lesson tonight. Pray for our church, pray for our nation, most of all those who are lost. And no other requests, then we'll bow and go to the Lord in prayer at this time. Mark, can you lead us in prayer?
Most dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the things you have done for us. We thank you for this little day, Lord. We thank you for our church, Lord. For several requests tonight, Lord, as we can reach these, Lord, that we have problems that are traveling, Lord, and lost loved ones, Lord. As we want these, Lord, we come together and we need those in need. We put the MC praise message tonight, Lord, for the things said, Lord, speaking of ones, speaking of, Lord, thank you, lost. I'm so just to say, Lord, you like, you get it for us,
Stand to sing page 479. And we'll sing the first and the last 479. On the first.
Thank
chapter 14, Genesis chapter 14. One of the observations that I have made over the past few years is that many of our younger people, when I say younger people, I'm speaking primarily those younger than myself, maybe age 60 and under, who, even some who grew up and were raised in this work, have gotten to the place that they don't see the necessity of continuing the practices that we believe in as missionary Baptists. And the reason I am what I am is because I feel like it's the closest to what God's Word teaches. And all down through the years, I have studied the different Baptist groups. In fact, here a while back, I taught a series on several Wednesday nights on the different major groups, 5 major groups of Baptists. And even though that the 5 major groups of Baptists that we studied doctrinally are very similar, yet there are practices that are different. And it's the practices that make us what we are. And so I'm asked this question sometimes from younger people. What difference does it make? It doesn't make any difference how the offering's done. So we have one. It doesn't make any difference whether God's people wash the saints' feet or not. The main goal should be promotion of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, I agree, that should be. In fact, in the Great Commission that Jesus gave to the church, that was the very first part of the Great Commission that he gave to the church, was to preach the gospel. And then to baptize those who believe and then teach them all things of God. But as I thought about that, and I've seen more and more young couples leave our churches and go to other types of Baptists. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why. Maybe some who were raised all their lives in Missionary Baptist Church. And I'm not saying that, that they made the wrong move. If that's what the Lord led them to do, well, then that's between them and the Lord. But I felt it would be good that we go back over some of these things that identify us as missionary Baptists. And I want to begin tonight with our method of giving. And you might say, well, you're preaching to the choir tonight, because we're all pretty well in agreement as to how we should give to support the cause of Christ. I know that down through the years that I've had many people ask me the question, does your church have a budget? And every time the answer was no. And that really shakes them up, because they feel like every organization needs a budget. But somehow the Lord always provides. And some have asked, well, if you don't receive a salary, how do you make it? How do you support your family? Many, many years ago, it was probably back in the early 1970s, my first cousin's husband was pastoring a church over in the Franklin, Louisiana area. And it wasn't a real large church. It was kind of out in the country from Franklinton. He met up with the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Franklinton one day, and they were talking. And First Baptist Church pastor said, you know, they give me $12,000 a year. It was a much larger church than my cousin's husband was pastoring. And yes, my cousin's husband said, Stony Point support you well? He said, yeah, they gave me $25,000 last year. Double what the pastor at the First Baptist was getting. And he just couldn't believe that. But I know that's not always the case. I know that we have a lot of small churches who are not able to support a full-time pastor. And they can't give as much naturally as a larger church. But let's get into this in the 14th chapter of the book of Genesis, in verses 19 and 20. The first mention of tithing is made in the scripture. Now, let me hasten to say this, that down through the years I've heard different people maybe misunderstand what we believe about giving. I heard one man say one time, he said, we don't believe in tithing. And I asked him, I said, have you ever given 10% of your have you ever given 10% of your income? He said, oh, yes, sir. That's what I normally give. I said, you're tithing. And I'll get into that a little bit later in the study. So let's read verses 19 and 20 in the 14th chapter of the book of Genesis. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. Now, if you'll study this, you'll find that Abram gave the high priest tithes of all that he possessed. And if you read the book of Malachi, you'll find that we're told to bring all the tithes into the storehouse. And the temple had a special area where people could bring a tenth of their increase. See, a tithe was not just only the money that was given, but it was a tenth of all your increase. If you grew a crop of watermelons, well then you gave 10% of the watermelons. If you increased your sheep by any significant number, that you would give 10% of that. And so in the storehouse, they had sheep, they had cattle, they had crops, or the harvest of crops and so on. And they had a little bit of everything there because it was a tenth of all their increase. And so people that brag about tithing, unless they give a tenth of all their increase, they're really not tithing, according to what we read in the Old Testament. 18th chapter of the book of Numbers. Sister Jennifer and I were talking about this the other day, about 12 tribes of Israel. And that there were two lists of those tribes. And the reason there was because two of the sons of Joseph were to inherit his inheritance. And then the tribe of Levi, the Levitical priesthood, they did not receive an inheritance from the land. So they were supported by the other tribes. So in the 18th chapter of the book of Numbers, beginning in verse 20, the Lord spake unto Aaron, thou shalt have no inheritance in their land, neither shalt thou have any part among them. I am thy part, and thine inheritance among the children of Israel. And behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tenth in Israel for an inheritance, for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Neither must the children of Israel henceforth come nigh the tabernacle of the congregation, lest they bear sin and die. But the Levites shall do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. Now this was written to Israel, remember. And it goes on that among the children of Israel they have no inheritance. The tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as a heave offering unto the Lord, I have given to the Levites to inherit. Therefore, I have said unto them, among the children of Israel, they shall have no inheritance. And so the Levites were supported wholly through the tithes that were given by the other tribes, because they performed the temple service. The book of Malachi, chapter 3, and we'll get a little bit more into what I was saying a while ago. Malachi chapter 3, and let's look at beginning in verse 7. From the days of your fathers, you are gone away from my ordinances, and have not kept them. Return unto me, and I will return unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. But ye said, wherein shall we return? That is, what are we to do? What have we done? What have we left out? Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. You're cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse. Remember, we mentioned that storehouse a bit ago. That there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. He shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. Bring all the tithes in the storehouse. All that increase, that 10% increase. Many years ago, I started junior college, and Brother Garrett went there for a while to junior college, and of course they call them community colleges now, in Bay Minette. I was in the first class of that college, and we did not have any. In fact, when we started that first year, we didn't even have any buildings of our own on campus. They were still doing the clearing of the land before they built the building, and so they leased buildings around the town of Bay Minette to have class in. Two of the churches that they used, and they used the National Guard Armory, and they used City Hall, and different places for the administrators to have an office. And I got out to one of the churches one day for a history class, and I looked up and there was this big banner stretched across one of the educational buildings. It said, the 11th commandment, thou shalt tithe. And I said, that's strange to me. I didn't know there was but 10. But nevertheless, that's what they had. And so I think they kind of misunderstood a little bit what the commandments are all about. 23rd chapter of the book of Matthew. We're taught here that some things are more important than money. Matthew chapter 23, verse 23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint, anise, and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. You blind guides, which strain at a gnat, and swallow a camel. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they were full of extortion and excess. So we're taught here that it's important to give, to support the cause of Christ. But it's also important to obey the Lord in these other areas as well. And not to overly emphasize one over the other. Apparently that's what was taking place here when Jesus made this statement. In the 7th chapter of the book of Hebrews, when Jesus came, there was a change in the priesthood. There was a change in the law. We are no longer under the ceremonial law. We're under grace. We're in the grace dispensation of time. So in Hebrews chapter 7, beginning in verse 1, for this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that also king of Salem, which is king of peace. Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, made like unto the Son of God, abideth the priest continually. That is, there was no record of who Melchizedek's parents were. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils. So he didn't just give him money, he also gave him a tenth of the spoils that were taken. And verily, they that are the sons of Levi, who receive the office of the priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, that is, of their brethren, though they come out of the loins of Abraham. But he whose descent is not counted from them received tithes of Abraham and blessed him that had the promises. So Abraham gave more than just financial help. Then he goes on down. Let's look at verse 11. Therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law. What further need was there that another priest should arise after the order of Melchizedek, and not be called after the order of Aaron? For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change also of the law, as I stated just a few moments ago. And that we're not operating under exactly the same system that they did in Old Testament time. The Lord brought a new way, brought a new commandment, made a new covenant through Jesus Christ. So in the second chapter, or the second book of Corinthians, 2 Corinthians chapter 9, Often been asked, well, why do you missionary Baptists have free will offerings? And I'm about to read it to you. 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 and 7, begin with. But this I say, he which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity. God loveth a cheerful giver. And you'll note that there was no set amount that was mentioned here. He said, as we purpose in our heart, let us give. And every child of God needs to purpose what they're going to give to the cause of Christ. And all about one time a person moved their letter to the church where I was pastoring, and they received their offerings before the preaching hour, as we do here at Snow Road. And so this person asked me, said, well, what if I don't like the sermon you preach? They were used to giving the offering after the message. And I said, well, I'll be glad to give you a refund if you don't like what I preach. And they never mentioned it to me again. But, we get kind of caught up in custom and tradition and miss some blessings along the way, I feel like. But as we purpose in our heart, if we don't have a purpose, then what are we going to give? Think about one man that seldom ever church that he was a member of, he seldom ever went. He'd come every once in a while. One of the members stopped by one day and was visiting with him. He asked him, he said, we love for you to come to church every Sunday. And he said, well, I tell you like it is, it costs me $1 every time I go to church. And, if the man had made $10 for the week, that'd be fine to give $1. But I have an idea, he was a business owner, I have an idea that he made a little more than that every week. And that's why he said here, the Lord loveth a cheerful giver. If we resent what we give, might as well keep it in our pocket, spend it on something else, because we're not going to get a blessing out of it if we don't give it cheerfully, or graciously, lovingly, to the cause of Christ. Let's drop down to verse 8. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye always, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. And God provides the sufficiency that we have, that we may give back to Him. In the 9th chapter of the book of 1 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, let's look at verse 7. Who goeth warfare any time in his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not the milk of the flock? Say I these things as a man, or say it not in the law of the same also. It is written in the law of Moses, thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doth God take care for oxen? I said a moment ago, we're no longer under the ceremonial law. We don't have to offer burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin as the high priest did. Because Jesus became our great high priest when he offered the sacrifice of himself. For you and for me, we can have eternal life. And of course there's a type here. Or saith he it all together for our sakes. For our sakes, no doubt, this is written, that he that ploweth should plow in hope, and that he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. We have sown unto you spiritual things. Is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? And this is Paul speaking as a minister of the gospel. If others be partakers of this power over you, are not ye rather, we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Do you not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple? And they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. It is those who would preach the gospel of Christ that it's incumbent upon those who are in that flock to support that man in the ministry. And Paul went on to make this statement in verse 15. But I have used none of these things, neither have I written these things, that it should be so done unto me. It were better for me to die than that any man should make my glory void. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me, yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward. But if against my will, the dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. Every God-called man of God should have a desire to preach the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. And to do it because he loves the Lord. And he has a burden for those who are lost. Has a desire to see the Lord's work grow. See the churches prosper spiritually. In verse 18, what is my reward then? Verily, when I preach the gospel, I may make the gospel of Christ without charge. That I abuse not my power in the gospel. Now, Paul, I believe, is saying here that he did not charge for preaching the gospel. And he had already made the statement that they which preach the gospel should live the gospel. He also made the statement that we read a few minutes ago that we need a purpose in our heart, what we're going to give to the cause of Christ. So putting all that together, Paul, I don't think would have received a salary. And you say, well, would it be easier on you ministers if you did receive a salary? Well, it might be, I don't know. I never received a salary for preaching. But, a man that receives a salary, he knows what his income is each week. He knows what his check's going to be. He knows what his deductions are going to be. And, in the way that we give in our churches, ministers don't know for sure what our are going to receive for preaching the gospel. For men's in the church for any length of time, he can kind of think back over the past few years of his pastoring and see what the average was during that time and kind of get an idea, because Uncle Sam requires us to pay quarterly income tax, estimated income tax. And if you don't know what you're going to be receiving, it's kind of difficult to estimate that. Sometimes I overestimate, sometimes I underestimate, and sometimes I've had to pay penalties to IRS because my estimate was off. And I know that the man that's on a salary, he's going to get it every week. I've had times when storms have come through, such as hurricanes and so forth. Church didn't meet. I didn't get anything that week. But the Lord took care. And so, do we want to do it the convenient way? Or the way that sounds best? Or do it scriptural way? I prefer to do it scriptural way. And I know that we probably receive criticism for that. People don't understand it. And yet, I believe what Paul taught here is the correct way to give in New Testament times. The 8th chapter of the book of 2 Corinthians. And this is where I have a problem. And that's pledging. In verse 12 of 2 Corinthians chapter 8, for if there be first a willing mind, it is accepted according to that a man hath, and not according to that he hath not. As I stand here tonight, I see several of our members sitting in the congregation that you're in businesses that you don't know for sure what your income's going to be in the next 12 months. You might kind of have an idea, but you don't know for sure. There could be drastic changes in the economy. There could be disasters. There could be many things that could affect your business. You can make more or less than you're making. So Paul said it's accepted according to what a man hath, and not according to that he hath not. For I mean not that other men be eased, and ye be burdened. By an equality, that now at this time your abundance may be a supply for their want, and their abundance also may be a supply for your want, that there may be equality. Of course, speaking about the congregation, that some would not be overburdened to give because some either could not give or would not give. 1 Corinthians 16, verses 1 and 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I've given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Now, Paul was very much concerned about some of the churches that were less prosperous than others. Some of them had real needs, just making ends meet from week to week. And he had a desire, as well as many people in churches, to somehow help these less fortunate churches and people. Paul didn't want it to be done in just a way that no one knew what was going to happen. And so he advised the churches on verse 2, on the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. In other words, when I come around, I collect money to give to these less fortunate saints. He said, you'll already have it. You've already received this money. And, of course, if you'll study this out a little further, you'll find also that this is the system that the early church used to support the ministry and the other aspects of the cause of Christ in their local community. And on the first day of the week, that they'd receive offerings to take care of the expenses of the church and support the pastor and the missionaries and so on. And it was a great blessing that they do it. So some may ask, well, why does a church receive offerings on Sunday? Because this is what was recommended by the beloved Apostle Paul in his writings. And so I know that there's been a lot of discussion down through the years as to, as I mentioned a while ago, when to receive the offerings. Receive it before or after the message. I can't take the scripture and prove it either way, other than we ought to do it. I heard a man say one time, he said, people just want to throw it on the floor and then the deacon sweep it up. After the service, I said, well, that's not being done decent and in order. The Bible teaches us to do everything decently and in order. So, God's house is not a playhouse. God's house is a house of worship, Jesus said. And when we come to worship Him, we worship Him in spirit, in truth, and certainly that He will bless as a result. Now, in taking all these things into consideration, and to go back to what I said in the beginning tonight, and I say this to all of us, that if we're going to maintain our identity as missionary Baptists, or are we to capitulate to every whim that comes along? If we don't have some identifiable things that stand out, then there's no difference in us and others. And I have friends in the ABA and the BMA and the Southern Baptist and the Independent Baptist. They're good folks, like the world of them. But I'm just saying that we need to maintain our identity. Because if we don't, missionary Baptists will get to the place that, like all these other churches now, they take Baptists off the sign. They become community church or whatever. So, what do we want to be? One of our elderly ministers with the Lord many years ago master's thesis. And I won't say where the seminary was or what it was, but men on that council who were questioning him asked him about some of these very things that I mentioned tonight. And he said, I'm persuaded that's what the Bible teaches. One of those men looked at him and said, well, brother, if you believe that, he said, you're always going to be a Piney Woods Baptist. He said, so be it. And he was one of the most outstanding evangelists of his day. Talking about Brother J.M. Stewart, Jim Stewart. And so, the world may say, I don't understand. Other churches and other groups may say, well, why don't you just come over and join us? Let's just forget about all these differences. There's Mother Hubbard here. Just all be together. A lot of people say, well, we're all going to be together in heaven. Well, that may be the case, but I'd rather do it God's way while I'm here. And then I'll let the Lord take care of the rest at the judgment seat of Christ. So I would encourage you, younger people, if you're contemplating or ever contemplate leaving this work, if you think a long time about it, because I was sincere when I said that I spent a lifetime studying the differences. And I come back to the same place every time. I'm convinced that we're the closest to what the Bible teaches. And I'm happy with that. You're here, you have something on your heart you'd like to make known. You have a verse of a song, we'll give you an opportunity to come.
Page 551.